empathy is the one thing I didn't associate with kind of law or lawyers. And then when I did the law clinic, that's when I realised, oh my goodness, this is such a big aspect. You're not just kind of a lawyer, you're that person's kind of comfort, a therapist almost to some extent. And you're all these kind of combined roles into one.
So for me, it's about reading statutes. I know that might sound boring for some, but I really love reading statutes and case law. And I also like to be intellectually challenged. And when I feel like I am being challenged, it allows me to perform at my best level. And in addition, with regards to case law, I like looking at the facts of the case and then how it leads on to what I'm studying.
What really fascinates me is how we try and impose rules on just normal human behaviour. So that's really relevant to criminal law. You know, as you'll find, Oliver, when you go into court and, you know, last night your defendant drank way too much whiskey and consequences followed, and then they're in court the next day in the cold light of day, and we're using the law to regulate their behaviour. I don't know why that's fascinating, but it is. I don't know if you
I think
found that.
there's a huge people element to it. I don't. When you did
Yeah.
the Citizen Advice Bureau, I don't know how you felt when. I think you picture yourself as when you're dealing with clients and you're really excited for it. But for me, when I first sat in front of a human being who was asking me for help, I froze. And I don't know how you felt when you first experienced that.
So I'm currently just doing my training for Citizens Advice. So I haven't currently experienced anything like that. But when I did do the client interviewing competition at the University of Hull, I will be honest, like in my first interview, I completely froze too, because I wasn't expecting what I was seeing in front of me.
I think it comes as a shock because you see it on TV and how confident people are, and you know you think you can do it, and you can do it, but I think it's the responsibility that's placed on you to answer that person's question. And I think you sort of overthink it, and the answer's actually quite simple. But I think the people element too, that what you're saying about, you know, a client or a defendant who got too drunk and then committed a crime or something, and they had absolutely no idea that they'd committed a crime. There's a huge people element to everything that you do, either as a lawyer or in another area of work. I think for me, explaining to somebody that, yep, I can understand what you're saying, but that means that you've broken the law because the law says this and you've just said that you did that. So the harsh reality of coming to the realisation that actually that behaviour wasn't lawful, and explaining that to somebody is quite difficult, and it can be emotionally challenging as well, not just for the person you explain it to, but for you, because in some circumstances it can be life-changing information that you're giving to that person.
I think in commercial context, putting together a legal argument can be really fun. You know, you hear people joke about writing a strongly worded letter. Well, it's that kind of feeling. You know, you're putting together an argument, and once you've done it and you've sent it off, there's a satisfaction from that. I don't know if you've done anything like that in your current job.
I think I'm kind of the opposite of the two of you. So when you were saying about statutes and things like that, that's the kind of thing where I was a bit like, oh, this is the bit where, you know, you kind of have to power through. But when it comes to taking on responsibility for people, I think that's where I thrive. That is my kind of, yes, I feel confident now. And I think it started off with kind of like when you're younger and like retail jobs and things like that. And then I came to the university, I did the client interviewing competitions as well. And then I did that like on a national level, like the university helped me through it. And it's just and then I did law clinic as well. That was the one where it's like real people. And it's when you're sat in front of someone who's being kind of closed off, and they don't feel quite confident to speak to you yet, and then you can get it out of them and you give them kind of that environment, make them feel comfortable enough to speak to you about something they originally stepped in through the door and they wasn't ready to talk about. And I felt such a satisfaction after that. And I remember I was speaking to the person who does the law clinic. I was like, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed kind of taking over that situation. And that's where I knew the people element is for me. Obviously, some people are a bit more commercially driven. They've got kind of like the business intellect behind them. But for me, it's kind of people based. I enjoy kind of helping people, but also not necessarily for the problems that they come in through the door with. Sometimes people can be very strong-minded, or they have their own opinions when they come through a door, because it's also when they speak to you and they know you're in legal practice, or they have a perception about you. They think you're not going to be kind of on their side. They almost have to convince you, or convince you to look at things from their perspective. But that's what we're kind of told to do when you start in practice. It's always think from the client's perspective. You are there for the client, taking yourself out the element, remembering to keep that distinction, and you are not the number one priority. They are the number one priority, and I enjoy that. I think that's where I
Do you
thrive.
think that some of those skills then that you learn in retail, or you're able to develop in retail, about kind of like focusing on the perspective or the interests of the customer or their particular needs that they're bringing to you, you've been able to kind of take that forward then in your work now as a legal practitioner? Because I suppose, yes, it's a very different context, but also, as you were saying, that the Legal Advice Centre, you're helping people, and it's really important to build a rapport with the person that you're helping. So it goes beyond the kind of maybe the more abstract or rule-based elements of law to very much a sort of a one-to-one human interaction where empathy and so forth is very important.
I think that's literally the word. Empathy is the one thing I didn't associate with kind of law or lawyers. And then when I did the law clinic, that's when I realised, oh my goodness, this is such a big aspect. You're not just kind of a lawyer, you're that person's kind of comfort, a therapist almost to some extent. And you're all these kind of combined roles into one. And that's where I found my personality. And those kind of, when I was younger, retail and speaking to people in general came into use. So I think it's when you don't expect it, so putting yourself out there, putting yourself forward for things, it's so important to do that because it builds on your personality, and your personality is an important thing for the law career.
I think naturally studying the law, you sort of absorb all of the different laws that there are, and when you see, maybe somebody going down a one-way street, you go, they shouldn't have done that. Or, there's different areas of it. I think, you do absorb and you start to notice things. It's easy to shout it out, I think, when you're learning it and you get quite passionate about it. I think it is very easy to get passionate about what you're learning. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's that sort of curiosity about law, the very idea of, whose interests are law serving, how can law be improved and why, what fundamental values is law upholding, and is law doing what it says it should do? How can it make people's lives better, I suppose, is that fundamental question that I'm interested in. That sort of drew me into legal academia, doing a PhD in sort of the relationship between medical law and ethics, and law and related disciplines like philosophy and politics. So for me, those questions have been absolutely key to sort of, I suppose, taking me along that journey, sustaining my interest, and give me that sense of, this is where I might want to focus my teaching, might want to focus my research, might want to focus my scholarship. So maybe to some it might seem more removed or abstract from the sort of the everyday work of a legal practitioner, but the impact that it can have is further down the line. So when you're speaking with maybe medics or psychiatrists and people like that, you're presenting your research to other disciplines, showing how law and the challenges that law are facing. You can't just approach in a really sort of narrow, insular way. You've got to draw on insights from other disciplines as well, and then sharing that with students, again, to kind of maybe break down those misconceptions that when you're studying law, it is just about the law and it's just about cases and statutes and so on. Actually, there is a rich seam of material that goes beyond what we might think of legal material to help us explore and think through and maybe suggest solutions to legal problems.
I think on that point, Phil, as a teacher of the law, do you get a greater satisfaction pointing out the law that works or the law that doesn't? Because there is a lot of law that is not fit for purpose and does not work. And I think it's important to realise that you're not going to learn all the good things about the law, you will learn the bad things, and that's equally just as important.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think sometimes it's refreshing to be able to identify where perhaps a recent legal development, it might be an act of parliament or what have you, that has followed from a long process of debate and drafting and parliamentary discussion, has improved the regulatory position in a particular area of law. So my area might be medical healthcare law, mental health law and so forth. And to show that actually good things can come from that process. It's not just a talking shop. We're going to end up with better laws. But equally, particularly where laws are archaic, outdated, they may be serve the interests of a small minority rather than broader society. I think it's really important to point that out. And that's something which I think in the context of a law degree, you have the opportunity to explore. And for anyone who's thinking, well, should I study law? Actually, those 3 or 4 years as an undergraduate, that gives you that unique opportunity to do that. And I think, in other contexts, particularly maybe, you do a degree in another discipline, which, is great if that fascinates you. But if you're then doing like maybe a conversion course, there won't be the scope within the program to think through those sort of questions. And certainly you wouldn't have the opportunity then to maybe like in the final year of your degree, choose options that reflect your interests because it's much more condensed. So I think that for me, that's the sort of takeaway message about what's unique about legal study, that you can reflect on the areas that law in the jurisdictions that you're looking at, could be in England and Wales, could be beyond that. You could be looking at international perspective or comparative law perspective, where it's doing the kinds of things we want to see, where it's making people's lives better, or where it's actually hindering that and in need of change.